if you in this room, if you knew that the living water of God, that salvation was offered, okay? If you knew it was available, and you knew who offered it to you, that it was Jesus himself, the Messiah, who offered it to you, what should your response be? I hope you got a Bible with you, because we're going to be in the Bible today. In the book of John. We've been studying John for a while, and just by way of intro, and actually by way of review, I thought it'd be nice for us. It's kind of nice when you know a book of the Bible, right? Isn't that nice? And you're learning this book of the Bible really well. So we can remember what we've studied so far. If I was to ask you what happened in John chapter 1, we know that, don't we? We're smart, right? We're sharp as a tack, we are. John chapter 1, what's the first thing that happened? It talked about the Word. The Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. So if somebody asked you what's happening in chapter 1, that happened. And as soon as that happened, he talked about the Word and the Logos. Remember, we talked about that. The next thing was John the Baptist shows up, and he's testifying that this Logos, this really is Jesus, the Messiah really is Jesus. That takes us to John chapter 2. We did John chapter 2, and there are two things that happened in John chapter 2, okay? Two things in John chapter 2, and both of them are made out of stone. Right? Two stone things in John chapter 2. First of all, there are stone jars that are at a wedding, right? And he fills these stone jars up and changes water into wine, right? So the stone jars, that's at the wedding of Cana. The second thing that's made out of stone is this big temple that's there, and he cleanses the temple, and then he tells them that that's not the real temple we're talking about. I'm the real temple. Jesus replaces that temple with himself and says, I'm the real temple. Tear down this temple, and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. Basically, you Jews, you're going to tear down the temple. You're trying to preserve the fake temple that's here, right? Fake news. You're trying to preserve the fake temple, the big temple that's here. And in order to do that, you're going to destroy the real temple. You're going to tear it down, and I'm going to rebuild it in 3 days. So, John chapter 1, remember what we got? We've got John the Baptist. We've got the Word became flesh. We got two things in John chapter 2. Remember? Two things made out of stone jars, stone temple. John chapter 3, Nick at night. Okay? That's how I remember that. Nick at night. Nickelodeon. No, Nicodemus. He comes at night, right? And he doesn't know what's going on. He's Israel's teacher, and he doesn't even understand what it means to be born again, which is a very basic concept. And so that's what happens in John chapter 3, which leads us to today. And today what we find out is that God is He's not just the answer. Jesus is not just the answer for a certain group of people. It's not just for the religious people like Nicodemus. He's not just the answer for Nicodemus. He's not just the answer for, He's the answer for a wide variety, for a large group, a large segment of people. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite of what you find in the book of John in chapter 3, when we have Nicodemus. About as far opposite to Nicodemus is what you get in John chapter 4 with this woman that we find at a well. Okay? It's a woman at a well. So if we were just to compare the two and kind of look at the two different people, we see that Nicodemus is a very well-known, high name. People know him by name. I mean, this guy is Israel's teacher. Everybody knows him. He's important. He's famous. Right? And he's a religious leader. Compare that to the woman we're going to meet at the well. We don't even know her name. We don't know anything about her. She's just a woman that's at a well. And she's not really actually very religious at all. Nicodemus is this morally high, righteous man, right? This is a woman who's heretical in pretty much all of her beliefs. She's a Samaritan. And she's had 5 husbands. She's on her 6th, right? And the guy she's with now is not her husband. And you're like, dude, there's all kinds of moral issues that are going on in here. And Jesus is going to both of them. As a matter of fact, Jesus is going to proclaim himself to be the Messiah for the very first time today. He'll proclaim himself to be the Messiah, and he doesn't do it to a religious leader. He does it to a woman at a well. Okay? That's who he's going to proclaim himself to be the Messiah. Nicodemus is this powerful, powerful man. This woman's a nobody. Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night seeking answers, seeking spiritual answers. This woman's just at a well, doesn't know who Jesus is from Adam, and really doesn't care. She's just there. And Jesus interacts with her. She doesn't seek after Jesus. Jesus seeks after her. It's a completely different situation. It's the exact opposite. Jesus meets Nicodemus at night under the cloud of darkness. Here, this interaction happens at noon, broad daylight. When we look at Nicodemus, his reactions to Jesus are very rational, and they're very kind of slow in coming. Like he's trying to rationalize and understand exactly what it is that Jesus is trying to explain to him when he talks about being born again. This woman, the reaction is different. Instead of a man, it's a woman, and the reaction is very emotional, and it's very fast. She reacts. Just a completely different type of deal. And so what we find here in this passage, which I think is great, is that Jesus loves them both. And he puts them right by each other. He puts this man and this woman, this Nicodemus, this religious hierarchy guy, and this woman that's a nobody. And he puts them together and he loves them both. He says, I want to show you how I come to both of these people, okay? And Jesus comes in his humanity. He comes thirsty. So let's open up our Bible. We're going to find out how thirsty he is here in John chapter 4. It says now, let's look at verse 1. It says, now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. All right, so we saw this earlier, that John was out baptizing people, John the Baptist. And people are coming to him. And then what did John do? John was saying, hey, don't come to me. You're looking in the wrong place. That guy over there, that Jesus, you should go to him. Follow that guy. Okay? So he tells them to follow that guy, and people start following him. Well, as a result, now Jesus is the one that's got all kinds of people coming to get baptized. But it says specifically here, and this is important, it says, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. Jesus never baptized anybody, and you could probably guess why. Right? Because let's say that you're there and like Peter baptized you, and then like your buddy's there and Jesus baptized him. Well, like you're way better because you got baptized by Jesus, right? So that's kind of the feeling that people would be. So you don't want to. Jesus doesn't do any kind of baptizing himself here, but it goes on and it says here, so he left Judah and went back once more to Galilee. He's going back to Galilee because he's getting away from there because the crowds are coming in on him. This is going to happen a lot with Jesus, is that as he does miracles, as he performs signs of who he is, people are going to get excited about that. People are going to want to make him king. They're going to want to speed things up, and he's not ready yet. His time has not yet come for him to be crucified. Okay? There's stuff he's got to do still on earth before he's crucified. So we're waiting for that. Here we get, though, to the interaction with this woman. It says, now he had to go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. Is that true? Did he really have to go through Samaria? We got a map. Can we throw the map up? I mean, that's the map. So he's down here, and he's going north, and there's Samaria right in the middle. Jacob's well, which is where we're going to meet, is right there. Most people don't go through Samaria. Most of them are going to take this route off to the side, cross the Jordan, go over the traditional route, up that way. Why are they going to go that way? Because Jews don't like Samaritans. They're racist. This is serious racism. I mean, you consider Jim Crow in the South, right? Where you've got different water fountains, right? Where you drink from this water fountain, we'll drink from that water fountain. This is that way and worse. I mean, they wouldn't drink from the same utensils as a Samaritan. You said, well, Dustin, how's come? What's the deal with the Samaritans? What's the problem with this relationship? Well, what happened in about 722 BC is that the Assyrians came in and they attacked Israel, all right? And they took these Israelites and they took them captive, all right? This is just a quick history of what happened. Took them captive, and when they took them captive, they took most of them captive, but they left some of them, because the Assyrians had their own kind of way of doing things. They left some Jews there. And in the process of leaving some of them there, they then imported people from Babylon and from other places into that area so that they'd intermix with them and that they'd kind of intermarry with them and they'd become families and kind of crossbred, okay? That's the whole point. And not only were they crossbred in a physical and biological sense, but religiously as well. All of a sudden you know what, just for kicks and giggles, since we've got the time, if you're all right with it, turn to 2 Kings 17. Did I put that verse up there, Preston? I don't know if I did. We've got time, right? Verse 24, here's what it says. It says, the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon So what happened, the king of Assyria, he gets these people and he kicks them out, the Israelites. He takes them out of the northern kingdom, and he gets rid of them. And it says here, the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cuthah, Ava, Hamath, I don't know how to pronounce that, Sepharvaim, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. All right? They took over Samaria and lived in its towns. When they first lived there, they did not worship the Lord, right? Why? Because they're not from there, and they don't worship. They're not Jews, right? So he sent lions among them, and they killed some of the people. Well, that's a problem, right? As a general rule, if lions come in and start eating people, that's an issue, just saying. And so they got to figure out what to do with that. So it was reported to the king of Assyria, hey, lions are eating our people that we put in there. The people you deported and resettled in the towns of Samaria do not know what the God of that country requires. So they're not worshiping right in that land, is what it's saying. He has sent lions among them, which are killing them off because the people do not know what he requires. They don't know how to worship God right. Then the king of Assyria gave this order: have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires. So they had taken the priests out of this land, and they'd put the priests, and they'd taken the priests captive too. They left and put other people in here. Well, these people start getting eaten by lions. And they're like, well, they don't know how to worship God right. So the king of Assyria says, well, go get one of the priests that was there that knows how to worship that God right, how to worship Jehovah right. Bring them back there to teach the people so they don't all get eaten by lions. Okay? It's the Bible. It's practical. All right. It says, one of the priests who gave exile to Samaria came to live with Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. Nevertheless, each national group made its own god. See, even though they did that, they still worshiped their own god in the several towns where they settled, and set them up in the shrines of people in the Samaria, and had made the high places. The people from Babylon made Sukkot Benoth. So it goes on. Basically, the gist of it is that they continue to worship their own gods, and they don't worship like they should. And the people that are in this area, they become known as Samaritans, okay? And the Jews, when the Jews come back, right, from Babylon, they're going to build the temple. These Samaritans are like, oh, well, we want to get in on that. And they're like, no, you're not going to be part of this at all. You worship other gods. You're not pure Jews anymore. You're half-breeds, and we don't want anything to do with you. And so there's this severe and deep racism that happens, to the point where Jews won't go through Samaria because they might come in contact with somebody that's a Samaritan. You might have to go to the bathroom where a Samaritan went to the bathroom. You might have to drink out of a cup that a Samaritan drank out of. That would be horrible, right? And I think about the racism we've had as a country. It's the same type of a thing, only it's even sometimes in some ways even deeper, because it's well, in a lot of ways there's this idea that these people aren't fully human. They've lost. They're not everything that we are. And so Jesus, it says here, watch what it says about him. It says Jesus had to go through Samaria. No, he didn't. Nobody else had to go through Samaria. Why does he go through Samaria? Because he has an appointment with a woman in Samaria. God says Jesus has to go through Samaria. God has a point he wants to make this morning that we're going to experience here together this morning. So it says here, now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. So Jesus has been walking probably around 20 miles to get where he is. He's there, he's tired, and he wants some water. And it mentions multiple times that he stops at a well called Jacob's well. This is a very important well for the Jews, okay? Very significant, because Jacob is a very important person in the history of Israel, okay? So this is really important. And so what he does is Jesus stops and he's thirsty. He's thirsty. All of a sudden we see God is thirsty. He's human. And he wants a drink. That's normal, right? You're thirsty, you want a drink. And so he says, when the Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone into town to buy food. What town? Samaritan town. No. You mean Jesus' disciples went into a Samaritan town to buy food to eat from them contaminated Samaritans? Yeah. Because Jesus doesn't care about any of that junk. Jesus doesn't care about that stuff. His disciples don't care about that stuff. People that follow Jesus don't care about that stuff. They don't care about that stuff. We don't care about that stuff. And so he says, will you give me a drink? The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan. And not just a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. She's like, whoa, hold the phone. Why are you even talking to me? How can you even ask that question? It's obvious, everybody knows the big elephant in the room here is that you're a Jew and I'm not, and you think you're better than us, and you guys, you Jews, you treat us like garbage, and now all of a sudden you're wanting me to give you a drink. How are you even talking to me? You're not even supposed to talk to me. And give you a drink too? And so I get the feeling she's a little indignant here. She said, you are a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? How can you even ask? Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Whoa. All right, that is packed full of stuff right there. Let's just start at the beginning. It says, if you knew the gift of God. All right, so what is it that God is going to give us? Gift, right? Nicodemus in the last chapter, Nicodemus thought that it was something that you earned. It was something that he had as a result. It's saying right here that it's a gift. He said, if you knew what we're talking about, you don't understand, lady, but if you did, you would understand that this is a gift. I'm offering you a gift here. Let's go back to it. It says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, if you knew who was asking you for a drink right now, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Living water. What's living water? What's that about? Living water is basically salvation. If we look in the Old Testament, it's salvation in the Old Testament. Look at Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13. It says, my people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water. Right? He refers to himself as the spring of living water. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns. Broken cisterns that cannot hold water. Right? Broken cisterns. They've tried to dig their own salvation. Right? They've tried to create their own salvation, dig their own hole where they'll store their own salvation. Right? But it says they won't hold water. Right? What you need is living water, salvation from God. It says also, let's go to verse 13 of chapter 17 of Jeremiah. Do we have that one too? It says, Lord, says, you are the hope of Israel. All who forsake you will be put to shame. Those who turn away from you will be written in the dust because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water. Living water is salvation. And what Jesus is doing here is he's using physical thirst. Listen to this. He's using physical thirst and water as the contact point in evangelism. Okay? He's going to evangelize this woman. There's got to be a point of contact, right? He's going to meet somebody on their territory. And then once he does that, he says, listen, we're thirsty. We're talking about thirst here. He reverses the situation and says, I'm not the one that's thirsty, you are. Okay? I came here, I'm thirsty for water. And then she questions it and he immediately says, no, I'm not the one thirsty, you're thirsty. You have a thirst that's far deeper than the thirst that I have. And if you knew who I was, we would be talking about your thirst and how I can quench your thirst. And so it goes on. Watch what it says. It says, sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. So she's still thinking misunderstanding, right? She's still thinking about earthly stuff. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? In other words, now she's kind of mocking him. Really? You're going to give me living water, whoever you are? I don't see a rope. I don't see a bucket. I don't see a ladle. I don't see nothing. I'm more qualified than you are. I'm here in the middle of the day. I'm ready to go. You ain't got nothing. you must be greater than Jacob who created this thing, right? You must be greater than him then, if that's the case. Mock, right? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And she's got to be thinking, who in the world is this guy? What in the world is he talking about? Water flowing up from within me? Listen, I'm just here to get some water. And so she's like, all right, I'll bite. I'll bite. I hear you throwing the line out for me here. I'll bite. Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. All right? You're offering me a blessing. Okay? You're offering me something good. I want to receive this good thing you're offering me. Okay? You're offering it. I'll take it. Right? Is that salvation? I'm offering. Just take it. Right? Offering you the blessing. Right? That's it. That's it. Okay, well, I don't know who you are. I don't know nothing about you, but you're offering me something good. I'll just take it. No strings attached. That's it. We're all good. And so you can picture her. She's walking away. She's like, sure, I'll take that water. That'd be great. Give me the water. When you're ready, give me the water, right? And while she's walking away, that's the way I picture this. Jesus says, go call your husband and come back. Sure, you're going? Go ahead. Call your husband and come back. And all of a sudden, she's shocked. She's like, listen, I have no husband. See, the issue here, yeah, I can offer you blessing, but I can't give you blessing until we deal with the issue at hand here is sin. We have a sin problem. Sin is always at the forefront here. Sin is always at the beginning of this relationship with God. We always have to deal with, that's always the barrier that we've got to get over at the beginning. We've got to somehow get over this problem, this barrier between us and God. And she's like, yeah, sure, I'll take the water. He goes, okay, I'll take the water. Now go get your husband. Well, I don't have a husband. Yeah, you're right. You don't have a husband. You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you've just said is quite true. As a matter of fact, woman, the reason why you're here at noon and not here at night when all the other women are here is because you don't want to have any conversations with anybody because you're ashamed of your whole life. You come in the middle of the day because all the other women in town, they mock you because you've had husband after husband after husband after husband, and you just stopped marrying them because you're kind of done with it. And now you just live with guys, right? That's your lifestyle. And I know that. And she's like, whoa, wait a second. Okay, now things are getting real. Man, I was ready to get you a drink, but now all of a sudden we went from getting a drink to now you're getting heavy on me. What's that about? She says, I have no husband. Jesus said, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Sir, she says, sir. The woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Obviously, something's up because I never met you before. You don't know anybody. I don't know how you would have known this. I never met you before. But somehow you supernaturally, divinely know something about me. So you must be a prophet, because here's what a prophet does. A prophet is somebody who God speaks through a prophet. The difference between a prophet and a priest, if you want to know the difference between a prophet and a priest, is this. It's the direction of the communication from or to God. So when it comes to a prophet speaks to God, speaks to people from heaven. It goes through the prophet to people. A priest is the opposite. On behalf of people, the priest speaks to God or represents the people to God on man's behalf. It's the direction of the communication. And here she's saying communication is coming from God. I'm learning something from God, that this guy knows something. He's heard from God. He must be a prophet. He must be a prophet. Says, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. And so what happens here is she wants to be right with God. You can tell she wants to be right with God. She wants something to happen here. She wants this living water. But the question is, where does it come from? How? You been there? We're like, God, I want what you want for me. I want what you have for me. I want what you're offering. I just don't know where to get it. I don't know where it's located. I don't know what means I have to go through to get it. Watch what she says here. She says, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain. But the Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. See, back in 722 BC, when they destroyed the temple, things got even worse, actually, between the Jews and between the Samaritans, because the Samaritans actually ended up building their own temple, since they couldn't worship with the Jews because they built their temple. They built their own on Mount Gerizim. Well, then one of the leaders of Jerusalem actually came and burned that thing down, burned their temple down, right? So that's not good for race relations, right? Burn their temple down. That's not good for religion. That's not good for them. And so there's this hatred, and he's saying, listen, we believe, he says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain here, but you Jews claim that the place where we worship is in Jerusalem. Listen, I want to have a relationship with God. I want to worship God. I just don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Do I go to Mount Gerizim? Do I go to Jerusalem? What ceremony do I do? What rituals am I supposed to do? What prayers do I say? Jesus said, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. Now, this is interesting. He's basically saying, you guys really, Samaritans, you don't really know who God is because it's gotten so twisted. We do as Jews, but even they've got it messed up. It says, you Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. The kind of worshipers that the Father seeks are not worshipers that worship on this particular mountain or on that particular mountain. What he's seeking, what God seeks, and what Jesus is saying is that that's not the point. The point of worship isn't about external things, it's about internal things. It's about our spirit and in truth. It's what is in you that makes the difference. What is my heart toward God? Not what are my actions with my hands, what is my heart toward God? Have I been transformed from the inside out? Have I been born again, would be a way to say it in John chapter 3. Do I worship him in spirit and in truth, is the way we say it in John chapter 4. How do we worship him? And so Jesus says this, God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and in truth. God isn't a physical building like this temple. God isn't a physical bunch of jars like these jars. God is spirit. And so we have to worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay? So watch what she does. She says, okay. She says, all right, I get that. And this is where it all hits the head on this. This is where it all hits the head, right here. The woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. And when he comes, he will explain everything to us. You know what? You've told me a whole lot of stuff, sir. I really appreciate you being out here at the well and telling me all about worshiping in spirit and in truth. And you sure seem to know a lot because you sure are a great prophet. But you know who's even going to be better? Is that when the Messiah comes, then we'll really know. Then we'll really know. Because when the Messiah comes, he will explain all things to us and we'll know for sure. Okay? Then we'll really know. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. Or the word there is ego ami, which is the Greek word for I am that I am. In other words, it's the exact same thing that Moses said, or that was said to Moses when God said, who should I say sent you? I am that I am. Here, Jesus looks at the guy, looks at this woman, and he says, I am. He basically declares himself God right in front of her. And says, the one you're looking for, the Messiah, how glorious. Everything I'm telling you is true. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, she says. Let's close up with this. She wants to be right with God. But I want to go back. I want to go back to this. It says, if you knew. Let's go back to this statement. This statement just haunts me. It says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked." This is how I want to close this today. If you in this room, if you knew that the living water of God, that salvation was offered, okay? If you knew it was available, and you knew who offered it to you, that it was Jesus himself, the Messiah, who offered it to you, what should your response be? Let's look at it. Let's go back here. If you knew who he was. Verse 10, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. You would have asked, what is it that God is requiring of this woman? What is it that he wants her to do? Does he want her to fix everything in her life? Does he want her to go back and try to go back? Now, here's what you need to do. You need to go back and find every guy you've ever been with, all right? And I need you to get this all fixed out, right? And I need you to organize it, and I need you to reconcile all those relations. Is that what he's asking? No, he's not asking that at all. What he's saying is, if you knew that I offered you salvation, I want you to do something. I want you to ask me. Ask me. Is that works righteousness? Is that I'm gonna work for my salvation? No. The responsibility of you as a believer, is to believe what he's offering, believe who is offering it, and then ask. That's what he's saying. If you knew, you would ask. Why do you not receive from me, God says? Because you don't ask. Why are there so many people who don't have a relationship with God? Because they never asked for one. Why are there so many people that don't have from God? They never asked from God. And what I'm saying is that he's saying just ask. He's not asking for this woman to do anything else but ask. Just ask. I notice a couple things here. Salvation is for everybody. It's for everybody. It's for the religious leader, for the guy that's in charge of the church, for the woman who doesn't know anything about God. The woman who is at the well just hiding out because of her sin, afraid people are going to know who she is and what she's done. And it doesn't matter which one of those you're in. Both those people, the guy who thinks he's got it all together, the guy that's obeyed all the rules and done everything right, and the woman who's done everything wrong, they both stand in the exact same place before God, where God says, listen, I offer you salvation. It's nothing that you've done. I'm offering you salvation, and here's what I need you to do. I need you to ask for it. I need you to ask for it and receive it. That's what I'm asking you to do. You can't do anything. You couldn't have done anything. So if you do anything beyond asking and believing, then you somehow think you're contributing to your salvation in some way. And you've invalidated the whole thing. Because now you think that somehow you have some power to make yourself holy. You don't. That's his point. And Jesus says, I am. I am. You know, the one who will know the answers to all this stuff is the Messiah. When he comes, we'll know all the answers then, right? We'll know it all then, right? When he shows up. He says, Ego a me. I am. He says, I am. Everything you just heard, you're hearing directly from God. Hearing directly from God. This morning you might be here and you might say, hey, Dustin, you're right. I've always kind of thought that I have to do something, though. I really feel like I've got to do something to be saved. I got to do something to have a good relationship with God. I got to make sure that I don't, I just got to be really careful, and I got to obey the rules. And if if I'm more good than I am bad, if I do more good things than bad things, then it'll weigh itself out, and I'll be in good relationship with God. And I want to remind us that that's not the case this morning. That this woman had no prior relationship. She worshipped like a Samaritan. She was despised by everybody. And for some of you, you might think of yourself that way. Like, I don't even belong here. I don't belong in this church. I'm surprised they even want me to be around here. Why would they even want me to be here? I felt like that before. Can't believe they even let me come in this place. If they knew everything, if they knew all the stuff, if they knew all the skeletons in my closet, man, if the video went on of my life and everybody saw that, boy, I'd be like the woman at the well, man. Jesus ain't coming to see me, right? But see, Jesus knew all of that stuff. And even though he knew all of it, he saw the whole story. He sees the whole thing. He's seen every disgusting part. He goes out of his way to go through Samaria to meet you because he loves you. He's gone out of his way to go into Samaria, to where the messed up people are, to churches for the rest of us, right? And I want this church to be a church for the rest of us. People who aren't holy, people who aren't righteous, the people who have made mistakes, the people who have a skeleton or two in their closet, the people who don't raise their children perfectly, the ones who do make mistakes. Because those are the people that Jesus is after. Jesus is coming after the sick, not those who think they're well. And Jesus has gone through Samaria to find you and I. He's not afraid of Samaria. He's not afraid of Samaria at all. And he's coming after you. Just ask him. Just ask him for what you want. Ask him for what you need. Don't be afraid. All you got to do is ask. God, I thank you this morning for the opportunity for us just to be here together and to read your word. And God, I'm asking, God, from you, God, that you would just cleanse us from our sin. God, that you would make us the people you want us to be. God, that you would help us to recognize that your love just overwhelmingly just overpowers a multitude of sins. God, that like the Samaritan woman that nobody wanted to be around, God, we don't deserve you either, God, but you're after us and you love us, God, and we're going to stop and we're going to talk to you at the well. We're going to listen to you, God, and we're going to ask of you, God, because you offer us the only place where there's living water, the only place where there's salvation is from you. God, we got nowhere else to go. We know that, so we turn to you.